Hello there, and welcome into the High School OT Press Box. Evan Moesta here alongside J. Mike Blake, Joel Bryant. He will join us in just a minute. We're going to take a trip around the state of North Carolina here. We're going to cover the biggest news topics this week in high school sports. J. Mike, let's dive right into the things with our full court press, starting the biggest news over the last few days. And it starts, J. Mike, Major League Baseball. We saw 3 North Carolinians go on day 1 and a handful that have gone on Monday, including 4 guys from the high school ranks. Let's start, J. Mike, though, with the 3 players that went last night. Starting first round, 9 straight years that we have had a player from the state of North Carolina go in the first round. It was Josh Haymond of Wesleyan Christian Academy, who went 28th overall to Kansas City. Luke Stevenson, the UNC catcher, he went 35th overall to the Seattle Mariners. He is a Wake Forest high school product, a 2023 grad. And another player from inside the state of North Carolina that got drafted from the Tar Heels was outfielder Kane Kepley. He went 56 overall to the Chicago Cubs. He helped lead South Rowan to the state title in 2022. J. Mike, looking over these names, I don't think there were too many shocks when you started to look at who was in the draft mocks.
Yeah, these were the 3 players that kind of lined up exactly where the mock draft said they would be. They were the first 3 players gone. Different backgrounds for each, of course. With Josh Hammond, that is a guy that has been stamped for a good year or more that he was going to be this kind of first-round talent. He touched 99 earlier this year in one of his games, and he's being drafted as an infielder. Then you have kind of the other end of that spectrum, Kane Kepley. This is a guy who was never big enough, never strong enough, wasn't supposed to be this kind of prospect, but went to college and proved it. He was an integral part of South Rowan, not just their first championship in baseball history, first championship in school history in any North Carolina High School Athletic Association sport. He goes to Liberty, then he goes to Carolina, and the rest is history. He gets taken on the first day.
Yeah, J. Mike, let's dive a little bit deeper into Josh Hammond. Like I said, 9 straight years of a first-round draft pick being a North Carolinian. He goes 28th overall to the Kansas City Royals. Hammond had a great senior year for the books. Last year, as a junior, he finished state runner-up on the NCISA 4A state championship with Wesleyan Christian. This year, they run it back. They beat Metrolina Christian in 2 games, a straight sweep. I think the biggest thing from that is that he went 3 for 3 at the plate. He had a 2-run home run in game 1 of the best of 3 series. And then he was walked 6 times, but he still made an impact, like you said, on the mound. He threw 5 innings of 1-hit ball in that decisive second game that set the stage for the Trojans to walk things off later that afternoon. And I think that is such a key thing with Hammond, is that people didn't know what they were going to take him as. I think there were some comps on him being like an Austin Riley product almost with the Braves, because Riley out of high school, he had that strong arm and a really good bat, and they didn't know what was going to play the best, and ended up that he stuck as an infielder. But with Hammond, it's not a bad fallback option to throw 99 and be the type of athlete that he is. Obviously, he shined a lot for Team USA last summer, won a gold medal with them, and it shows the trust that people have in him as a pitcher, that Team USA gave him the ball in the gold medal game against Panama to get the start there. But just an illustrious career, split between Westchester Country Day and Wesleyan Christian, the last 2 spent with the Trojans. And obviously, I don't think if you were Josh Hammond, you could dream up a better finish to your high school career.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to put this out there. I know North Carolina, we love our basketball. We're the hoop state. The football talent's incredible. I don't think there's another sport that North Carolina produces the kind of, in quantity and quality, the kind of talent that baseball produces. 9 years the first rounder is
definitely
insane. And
I mean, if you look
comparable to it in any other sport that we play.
Yeah, you look at the tracker that we have up on High School OT of everybody that got selected. You start looking at the later rounds and you're like, goodness, there are guys getting taken. I think it's a testament to how strong the college baseball is in the state of North Carolina, that they're able to just go into their backyard, pick out top recruits, and develop these guys. And you're seeing players from Western Carolina, UNC Asheville. You're seeing guys all over who are, going off to college locally, developing for 2 or 3 years, and now getting into the MLB draft, and teams are taking flyers on them. Speaking of guys on day 2 that went, 4 high school players A couple of them, were projected to go a little bit higher, but obviously had some SEC commitments. So signability was a question there, one of which being Briggs McKenzie, the big left-hander from Corinth Holders. When the first round ended on Sunday night, the first 3 rounds ended on Sunday night, it was projected that he was one of the biggest names left on the board. And sure enough, in the 4th round, the Atlanta Braves take him with the 127th overall pick. And that started an absolute frenzy, J-Mike. There were, 6 players drafted in the span of 15 to 20 picks. CJ Gray from A.L. Brown, an NC State commit, he goes off the board to the Los Angeles Angels. 2 picks later, Coy James, the North Carolina Gatorade Baseball Player of the Year, he gets picked by the Washington Nationals. I know a lot of Nationals fans feel like they got a steal in the power-hitting James. And then in the later rounds, Jake Barbie from J.M. Robinson. The Texas Rangers take a flyer on the USC upstate commit. You might have to put those Spartanburg dreams on hold as he touches 95 this year for the Bulldogs. J-Mike, 4 guys go off the board in the college ranks. What do you think about those guys?
Kind of neat. In North Carolina, the baseball talent is not limited to one region of the state. It's not limited to the big cities, but it is kind of cool when you see 2 from the same county, like CJ Gray and Jake Barbie. I mean, from J.M. Robinson to Kannapolis, it's just a hop, skip, and a short drive. So those 2 being drafted right there. And then, like you said, there was actually back-to-back picks where North Carolina natives were taken in this draft. Barbie kind of a little bit off the radar. Everybody else, like, there are very few drafts in recent memory where you have those 4 high schoolers that are consistently projected in the first 120 or so picks. For Coy James and Briggs McKenzie to have fallen, to the 4th or 5th round is saying quite a lot about this senior class. It was really, really great baseball class in North Carolina this year.
Yeah, and the thing to watch for, as we mentioned, was are they going to sign? They have really good options on their plate. Gray going to NC State, Briggs McKenzie going to the defending national champions at LSU. That's not a bad option. You either go play in the Atlanta Braves system or you go to the defending national champions who had Cade Anderson, a left-hander very similar to McKenzie, just drafted in the top 5 of the draft. So it feels like, there's some pretty good shoes that he could fill in Baton Rouge. And then obviously with Coy James, he is an Ole Miss commit who made a lot of noise on the USA baseball scene the last couple of years for their 15U and their 18U. So if he ends up going with the Rebels, that could be a very strong decision for him as well. So we'll be monitoring that. And again, HighSchoolOT, a tracker of every player from the state of North Carolina that got picked during the Major League Baseball draft, rounds 1 all the way through 20. Let's move over to all state teams from HighSchoolOT. J-Mike helped work and put out some of those last week. They've been going out all summer. 2 left, but so far, girls lacrosse, boys lacrosse, and girls soccer are up there. Baseball and softball still to come. J-Mike, as we take a look at these all-state teams, what stands out to you as you kind of scoured through some of the top talent across the state in each sport?
Yeah, for girls lacrosse, you've got some of the state's all-time leading scorers kind of going out with the 4-time selections, like Lakin Wright of Willow Spring, Kate Denon, who's pictured there, of Bishop McGinnis, and Fayetteville Academy's Vanny Intini. She is, not in the record books because she's an independent school player, but she had, probably the most goals we've ever seen anybody score, more than 400 in her career by herself. There's 4 4-timers just in girls lacrosse. On the boys side, you did not have quite as many 4-year guys, but just a really strong year all around in boys lacrosse this season. And a lot of kind of new faces. Girls soccer certainly had a lot of new faces as well. You did have 3 4-timers there, and Blaine McElroy of Providence Day, Natalie Bowman of Wheatmore, and Avery Garrett of Pine Lake Prep. But interesting enough, girls soccer, this was like a fresh face kind of year. Nobody making the first team for the second time. And for as long as we've had this team, we've always had at least somebody repeat to the first team. We had some girls who could have done it this year, but they were instead selected to the second team this year, just somebody else there a little bit better. So really, really interesting, varied year where a lot of different people from a lot of different schools making it in those sports.
Anything big you're looking forward to as these baseball and softball teams start to round into shape? And, that'll kind of close the book on these all-state teams for 2025 with this school year.
Yeah, I think for baseball, it's going to. We've never had this many major league draft picks, straight out of high school on our team before. Usually, it's like 2 or 3, especially since the draft has been shortened to 20 rounds in recent memory. And then on the softball side, it is absolutely loaded in pitchers and two-way players, and we have specific slots. We can only fit so many on the team. It's gonna be really tough choices to make who gets the first team nod, who gets a second team nod, because there's so many Division One commits that they're all all very similar resumes. So that's going to be the tough thing. It'll be a super loaded pitching class in softball.
Yeah, and I think the big thing to look for as well is that in softball, and just for all of these all-state teams, keep in mind, the coaches associations all have teams, and they're divided up in different regions, classifications, things of that nature. But with High School OT's all-state team, if you make that team, whether it's honorable mention or first team, you're pretty much one of the top 100 players in your sport in the state of North Carolina, regardless of class, regardless of association. I mean, it's a pretty prestigious honor to be one of those, people that are named to these teams. And I think sometimes people might take a look and be like, I'm only on the third team. No, you're like maybe one of the top 5 or 6 infielders in the entire state of North Carolina.
We do run into that a few times. So if you make a coach's all-state team, which is usually broken up by class, you're automatically nominated for our team. But if you're, say, third team all-state 4A, but we look at that and say, actually, you're more of a second team all-state for us, we actually bumped you up. You may not feel like you bumped up, or you may not feel like that's a big nod to be second team versus third team, but it's actually a huge step forward because we have limited spots on each team and it's limited by position. So that's another thing too. At least 2 goalies, for instance, for lacrosse, at least 2 goalkeepers on each team for soccer. So if you are on third team, you're essentially one of the top 6 goalies in the state. So don't look at third team and feel like that's a knock. That's actually pretty prestigious to make that list.
And then the last thing we can get to here in our early rundown is football commitments. They have been pouring in like crazy since the start of June. There's so many teams around the country that have been able to get verbal commitments from players in the 2026 class in the state of North Carolina. I mean, if you go down that list, you're looking at, let's start in state. You have NC State, UNC, Duke. NC State, a nice little haul in the receiver room. They got Tyreek Copper from Kinston, Jair Richburg, East Forsyth, Aiden Smalls from Clayton. Also in the secondary, they got Devarius Surratt from Crest. UNC got the Griffins Haynes brothers, Xavion and Jaden. Xavion initially had the commitment to UNC under Mac Brown and then ended up going back to the Tar Heels under Coach Bill Belichick. You look at Duke, they got a bunch of really talented athletes, 2 of which from the state of North Carolina, Katie Cotton and Lyric Pettis. Cotton, a star for the state champions at West Forsyth, and Pettis resides in that secondary alongside Surratt at Crest. Wake Forest, they've also had a pretty impressive haul as well. A pair of quarterbacks, Gannon Jones from Cardinal Gibbons, and you look at Grant Lawless from East Lincoln. They've also pulled in Devin Goldston, who is the wide receiver at Leesville Road. Other programs that have pulled in players from the state of North Carolina: Rutgers, Virginia Tech, South Carolina, Miami, Georgia, Clemson, Stanford, Texas, Notre Dame, Tennessee. So all across the region in the SEC and the ACC, there are a lot of players who have verbally committed to play at the next level. We're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we will be joined by High School OT's Joel Bryant. He and I will dive a little bit deeper into that recruiting, some of the big names that went off the board this past weekend, what may be coming up, and some storylines to look for of what has happened so far in this latest recruiting cycle from mid-June through now in July. We're going to take a quick break here on the High School OT Press Box. We'll be back in just a minute with Joel Bryant. We are back here. You are in the High School OT Press Box. Evan Moesta here alongside Joel Bryant. As we closed out the last segment, we talked a little bit about recruiting around the state of North Carolina and what that looks like. This past weekend, 3 really big names on the 2026 class went off the board. Samari Matthews over at Huff High School. He announced his commitment to the Texas Longhorns. Nick Reddish, a nickel and defensive back over at Independence High School, he announced his commitment to Notre Dame. And then J.B. Shabazz, the big hulking lineman over at East Forsyth, pledged his commitment to Tennessee. Joel, when you look at this list and you look at these commitments, did anything stand out to you? And obviously, we talk a lot about Samari Matthews, and when you look at what he has been able to do over the past 3 years of his career at Huff, he's one of the most unique talents that I think we have seen in high school football in this state, certainly in the time that you've been covering since 2016.
Yeah, all you need to know about Samari is people don't even throw at him. So we do our all-state teams. We have all these guys that get 7, 8 interceptions a year, and Samari's on there with 1 or 2 every single year. It's because he doesn't ever get thrown at. People don't test him, and that's the biggest credit to him. Ever since he was Jeremy pointed this out on Twitter. They tested him a little bit when he was a freshman, and then ever since then they haven't been testing him at all. He's a true lockdown corner, really good player for Huff. I know that there's some schools locally that had him possibly as the best player in this class from this state. So that's a really good get for Texas. And these 3 guys, it's just continuing the trend here. None of these top players are staying in state, with the exception of Xavion Griffin-Haynes and Trayshawn Ruffin. It hasn't been a good class for the in-state schools.
Yeah, and I think an interesting takeaway from Samari Matthews, who had, I have to add, a spectacular commitment ceremony. The Huskies pulled out all the stops for that one, but one of the interesting, little anecdotes that they shared during his commitment was the fact that when he was a freshman in high school, he was already getting offers from schools, but the coaching staff and his parents kind of agreed, like, let's keep this kid grounded and not let him know until he's kind of gone through the gauntlet of playing down in that area. And as the coaches joke, they're like, you haven't faced Casey Concepcion at Chambers yet. I'm not going to put a freshman out there knowing he has offers. And that just speaks to his talent early on. Teams just identified that. And then obviously going into his sophomore year in 2022, you started to see those offers just pour in for Matthews. But yeah, Joel, you mentioned a little bit of the in-state stuff. Let's take a quick look at what that in-state recruiting looks like. Actually, here's some notable recruits who have gone off the board so far in the month of July. But also, I mentioned NC State. They grabbed 3 in-state wide receivers. They also got Devarius Surratt. Wake Forest, they've kind of had a little bit of an interesting splash, I would say, in the recruiting cycle, grabbing 2 quarterbacks and then going out and getting a wide receiver from Leesville Road. Duke got a couple of athletes. And then obviously, as you mentioned, Xavion Griffin-Haynes going to North Carolina. You've talked about it a little bit in depth on the Adam Gold Show and the Drive with Tim Donnelly on 99.9 The Fan. But what is it that you think is leading to some of these guys, stepping outside of the boundaries of North Carolina?
Well, it's a lot of things. For one, some of these kids aren't going to want to stay in state. Some of them want to get out. They want a different experience. They don't want to be close to their hometown for whatever reason. So some of those guys you're just never really going to have a good chance at. Some of them, obviously, with these bigger programs, these Notre Dames, these Clemsons, every Saturday on the national stage in prime time. Frankly, the in-state schools don't really have that kind of platform right now. And all these kids come out, they come out of high school, they all have dreams of the NFL, which, props to them for having those dreams. And they want to do everything they can to put themselves in the best position to get to the NFL. Then, of course, there's the NIL component of it. And that's hard to get into because we don't know the actual numbers that are really be throwing around at these kids and what's going on there. We can speculate that some of these schools like Oregon have some pretty big chests that they can play with. So of course that's a component of it as well. The other thing that I always try to remind myself is, we have these services on 3/Rivals now and 24/7. They have their own rankings, but that doesn't mean that these in-state programs have the exact same rankings as them. I know for a fact that one of the players that is not in the top 100 is pretty high up on the board of one of these programs. So they have their own rankings, they have their own priorities. Maybe they're just not as high in these kids as the out-of-state schools are. that's possible as well. So there's a lot of things involved with it. And I will say, the last time that we had in-state school, like really put a fence around the class, that was the Mac Brown 2021 class, and that class, it didn't really pan out at UNC. So maybe there's some of that as well. Like, look, we did it before and it didn't really work out. So there's a lot of things going on with it. This one just kind of feels like a perfect storm. There's lots of different things in this class. We have, some bloodline connections to these out-of-state schools. There's stuff like that going on here. So it's a lot of little things adding up into one big problem.
Yeah, and we take a look at some of the commitments that have happened over the last 2 months. Is there anything that stands out to you in terms of maybe some programs that have recruited really well, some decisions that have been made? Obviously, there have been a couple of flips. There have been some guys who have, in a very rare instance, gone against their crystal ball predictions. Is there anything that has just stood out to you as you've seen these pour in over the last month or so?
Well, the one that stood out to me has been App State. Under the previous regime, they didn't really recruit inside North Carolina for whatever reason. Coach Loggins has come in there, and they already have 6 recruits in this rising senior class already. So I think that's more. They have more this year than they had the last couple of years combined. So they're doing a good job. Wake Forest is doing interesting things. They're finding some guys that are a little bit kind of under recruited or under I guess the word for it is under kind of seen, I guess. And they find these guys they like and they go after them. Then they get them committed really fast. ECU is doing a decent job with the in-state 3 stars, and NC State's doing their thing where they're trying to find these guys who they believe in the football character of. They might not be the highest ranked guys on these recruiting sites, but they find the guys they like and they really prioritize them, and they get them in there, and they're going to do their best they can to develop them.
Yeah, I think a good example of that was the Aiden Smalls flip. He was committed to Rice as a quarterback. Obviously, if you saw him play wide receiver his sophomore year when he was at Cardinal Gibbons High School, he had a really prolific sophomore year as a receiver, and it felt like Doran just kind of never gave up on that hope and kept working and working and working, and then eventually Smalls breaks through and flips his commitment, announces that he's going to go to NC State as a wide receiver. Anything else really stand out, Joel? Obviously, some names on this list all over the state. PJ Dean just committed to Georgia over the last couple of days. Keyshawn Stansel a couple days ago went to Clemson, and then you were there in person to see Keyshawn Elizer over at Southeast Raleigh pick Stanford.
Well, the interesting thing overall is that it's not like 20 different schools is coming in and taking these guys. There's a lot of, it's like the same 4 or 5 schools just over and over again. So there's a lot of these guys are going to be teammates at the next level. The Clemson guys, Leo Delaney from Providence State, the lineman, Keyshawn Stansel, the defensive lineman, and Gordon Sellers, wide receiver, they're going to be teammates at Clemson. There's a bunch of Notre Dame guys, like Thomas Davis Jr., Rodney Dunham. There's so many of these guys going to Notre Dame. Ebenezer Iwatade at South Garner. So it's interesting that a lot of these guys are going to be teammates at the next level, despite going out of state. So that's kind of an interesting wrinkle to it.
Well, Joel, there's a lot coming up. Practice is just a couple of weeks away. A lot of these guys getting their commitments out of the way now so they can really focus on their senior seasons of football. Should be an exciting time. What do you have coming here over the next couple of weeks, and what are you most excited about that, it's almost go time?
Yeah, I'm excited to see scrimmages get here. I mean, this time of year is just kind of like everyone's just waiting for the actual stuff to come on. We'll have more football preview content coming out. We're monitoring the transfer situation. That's something that still is evolving, that it doesn't really stop until week 1 comes. Actually, there was transfers last year that happened during the season. We just had a couple of big ones this week of all region and all state guys going to new schools. So you have to keep an eye on that transfer list because it's getting updated pretty regularly, and that is playing a big part in the current state of high school football in North Carolina.
Well, that is Joel Bryant breaking down all the recruiting and what is to come. As always, he has content across HighSchoolOT.com where you can stay up to date with all of the latest football news. We're going to take one more break. Come on back. J. Mike Blake's going to join us again, and we will dive into a little bit of June high school basketball on the girls and boys side. Lots of live period action. Again, you are tuned in to the High School OT Press Box. welcome back in the High School OT Press Box. J. Mike Blake joins us again. J. Mike, you and I, we saw a lot of basketball last month. You know, they say June basketball is reserved for high school, and that is indeed the case. There were a lot of different live period events. You were able to see the boys and girls side in both the NCBCA, which featured NCHSA teams, and the NCISAA live periods, all of those out in the triad last month. It's going to be a much different high school basketball landscape this year for a lot of reasons. Joel was talking about impact transfers in football in the last segment. There's a lot of impact transfers in basketball, but also moving to 8 classifications. I think it just opens things up so wide now for so many teams who maybe in the past they were a 3rd round team and they're sitting there like, man, maybe we get, catch some fire, make a little bit of a run. Now those teams are kind of sitting around and saying, man, we're 4A or 5A or 8A, like we're in the mix now, like we're going to contend for a state championship. So what did you see? Let's start first on the girls' side.
Yeah, well, to just kind of expand upon that point a little bit, I talked to a number of players and coaches. You can kind of see the light come on a little bit where they're like, wait a second, they're not in our class. They're not in our class. If you just win 2 playoff games, you're in the like quote unquote Elite 8. Like, wait a second, like, yeah, if we were just better than X many number of teams, then all of a sudden we're a state title contender, which is a little bit different position for some of these teams that, like you said, they're used to making runs or maybe winning playoff games, but not necessarily being one of the last ones standing. On the girls' side, let me start with the association. Anytime I say association, I'm talking about the North Carolina High School Athletic Association, where all the public schools, charter schools are. I just don't want to repeat that long term. So the association schools. You have a lot of schools on that side that are returning a lot of players, or if they're not returning a lot of players, they still seem to have the people that make them go. So I think the best team that I saw is Cherokee, and that is going to surprise people. I think so many people get caught up in how many fans Cherokee brings to state championships or how many fans Cherokee brings on the road that they kind of lost sight of the fact that Cherokee is one of the best girls basketball teams in the state of any classification. I think they could have beat anybody in the state last year on any given night. And is showed by our final rankings, which I think we had them 3rd behind only Lake Norman and Grace Christian of Sanford. And in our way too early rankings, they're 3rd behind no other public schools. They're bringing back 4 of their starting 5, and their bench got enough minutes last year where they can have no drop off. They have a lot of freshmen coming in. They can sub 5 or 5 and just keep that running clock going. The only thing for them is their new conference has, I think, like 11 members or 12 members. So they're only going to play each other once, but that's going to cut down the non-conference opportunities to fine-tune themselves, and they'll need that going into the playoffs. Lake Norman is a team that returns only a few starters, but has enough people off the bench who are ready to make that next jump. I don't see Lake Norman falling off at all. They're a preseason top 5 team for us. Southeast Alamance, they didn't even have a senior class last year when they won the 2A title. Now they're 5A, so they are one of the best for us. Other teams that maybe people need to start thinking of them in terms of being a state title contender, but maybe in the past you haven't for whatever reason. Hoggard in 8A, North Mecklenburg in 7A. Everyone knows about Terry Sanford in 6A. Also get ready to talk about South Garner in 7A. Queens Grant in 2A might be Cherokee's biggest test. McDowell in Southeast Raleigh 7A, even Overhills in 7A. 7A is really deep. 7A is deeper than 8A in most sports, and girls basketball no different. Also, North Lincoln in 5A, South Mech 8A, Marvin Ridge 7A, and Wakefield 8A. There's a few other teams, but once you start kind of getting past the teams I've listed, you get into some teams where there's not a whole lot of depth. And so there could be an injury here or there, or if this player decides to, as Joel talked about, transfers get closer to the start of the school year, and all of a sudden everything changes. But those are some of the best looking teams that we saw in that weekend.
Yeah, and I think we're just going to have to calibrate our minds now to realize that, I think when you think about what's the cream of the crop in the state of North Carolina, you kind of tend to look at, what was the 4A classification. It might not necessarily be the 8A class. It might be that 7A class. That's just really where, like, the nice sweet spot of where all the talent is in terms of just overall successful athletic departments.
Oh.
But like you had said, there are some teams that I think are in that 8A or that 8A classification that are looking around now. And I mean, you talk about Hoggard and Wakefield, like that was the regional final last year in 4A. And, you know, their road isn't getting harder by moving up to 8A. I would even argue it's a little bit maybe easier, but it also feels like they could be on a collision course again, just in the 8A classification, the way things are panning out. And obviously both sides returned a lot of, you know, substantial players. And I think it's interesting. Hoggard may have lost a couple of bench pieces, but, you know, they overcome that in just how much starting depth returns for them. And Wakefield, on the other hand, may have lost 3 or 4 players that were really key in their top 6 of their rotation, but they're also replacing that with a very talented junior varsity team. And, you know, I think by the time March comes around, they're going to be right at their best like they were a year ago. And then obviously, to your point, Lake Norman, like, it's just next girl up there, and obviously they've played that system for so long, and the players that come into that program now know what the expectation is under Coach Graham, and they've been really good. And I just think they're at the point of no return in terms of their identity as a program. And then on the NCISA side, as you mentioned Grace Christian School. You know, what is that looking like? It seems like they have loaded up after winning another state championship. They already had 2 really key pieces in Jordan Speller and Kendall English. But I feel like from what I've heard from you, that is just, again, a really special team that's going to make some noise this winter.
Yeah, I have not seen a girls basketball team have the kind of fortuitous transfers that Grace Christian of Sanford has had in the last 4 years. You know, first there was Sarah Strong coming from Fuquay Arena after her freshman year. And after that, of course, girls are going to want to go to Grace Christian because they want to play with the best player in the country. If you haven't checked out any, there are WNBA mock drafts that have Sarah Strong number 1 next year, as if she would leave after her sophomore year of college. However, like, the remaining is Jordan Speller, who we saw win an MVP as a freshman at North Pitt. Kendall English. Both those 2 were first team All-State for us last year. Then Cooper Cox leaves Wesleyan Christian to go to Grace Christian of Sanford. She was honorable mention All-State for us last year. Really good point guard going into her sophomore year, already getting tons of Division I offers. And then also from Wesleyan Christian is Kennedy Jackson. She'll be a 5th-year senior. She would kind of be the 5th person on the starting lineup because also after we did the way too early rankings, Lola Venor, I hope I'm saying the last name correctly, of Page High School, who was, I believe, 3rd team or honorable mention All-State for us last year. Really smooth point guard. She leaves Page to go to Grace Christian of Sanford. So that's 3 really good, like guards there who can handle the ball. Jordan Speller can attack the rim. Cooper Cox distributing, Lola Van Noor, a little bit of everything. And like that is just unbelievable. If they were in the same classification as Cannon School, it might be a really fun breakdown, like a really fun showdown, because Cannon School won the Independent Schools 4A title last year and brought back 4 starters. So they kind of different paths here, right? Where Cannon is bringing back everyone, and Grace Christian has added 3 new starters from who transferred from other places who were already established at those places. But if they were in the same class, it'd be a really fun championship showdown. As it looks right now, like if we're talking about state championship stuff, there's no one close to Grace Christian in the independent 3A ranks, except maybe Concord Academy, but they just don't have the depth. And then on the 4A side, again, Cannon School, the closest team I see to it is like Providence Day, but the depth there for Cannon School is at this. Anything can happen on any given night, especially when we're a long ways away from what happens in the playoffs. But those 2 are kind of established themselves. That's why they're number 1, number 2 in our way too early top 25.
As J. Mike Blake mentioned, High School OT insiders, they can see the full way too early top 25, debate it, go through all of it. There's also some extra names of teams that really stood out this summer that are primed to make a good run this winter. Now let's dive into the boys' side. I think that the conversation there starts with the NCISA. Obviously, the number 1 team in those way too early rankings is Greensboro Day School. And just across the board, since that way too early ranking was published, there have been a couple of impact transfers for a couple of NCISA programs, whether it be guys coming in or going out. But I still think that in no way alters how big of a year this could be for that association in terms of the talent pool and what it's going to be able to produce, J. Mike, on the boys' side.
Yeah, and this is where you really have to wait for the song to stop playing and see where everyone sits in the musical chairs. But Greensboro Day, to me, when I saw them, they look like the Monstars. And there's already Greensboro Day usually is not the team that looks like the Monstars. They just beat you with really sound defense, good passing, good spacing, cutting, screens, like all the basic fundamental things. And they beat you in a very low scoring game with very few possessions. They're not going to change their style of play, but they have 7-foot Julian Adigan, and then they have 6'10" Mason Robinson, and they never have to be on the court at the same time. It just looks like the exact same five is out there. Marty Giant might be the best on-ball defender in the state, fifth-year senior for the Bengals. Grant Duggins is a 6'9", very versatile wing forward. You have Andrew Jurgens, who's 6'7", also very versatile. The way that they can just bring off the second five onto the court and have no drop-off and really no differentiation. Like there's not going to be a time this year where someone gets in foul trouble, except maybe Marty Giant because of his on-ball defense, where Coach Freddie Johnson, who's won 1,200 games, not exaggerating, where he looks at the bench and goes, oh, man, so-and-so's in foul trouble. Who am I going to have to replace him? Like, there's always someone there. That's just not a knock on anyone who's in the starting five. It's just how versatile and deep they are this year. Because of the association schools having so much turnover and kind of they had a really good run, and these things go in cycles on the public school side. But because of that, this year's top 25 could have a lot of private schools in it from start to finish. You have Christ School, who's looked really, really good and really impressed. I have Greensboro Day a little bit ahead of them right now. Burlington School had a number of transfers, a lot of talent. They'll figure things out as we get closer to the start of the season. As you mentioned, there was some transfers that happened after we came out with top 25. I had Caldwell Academy number 4, knowing that Cole Clower, there were some rumors about him possibly going to IMG Academy. He did go to IMG Academy. And then number 14, we had Davidson Day, who at the time I did not have 2 transfers that they have picked up, including Xavier Hall, a guy I saw last year down in Lakewood High School. So a very big move for him going from the eastern part of the state out to Davidson Day. If I had known that then, I probably would have almost flipped. Like Davidson Day goes to 4th, Caldwell Academy goes to 14th. It's not enough to take Caldwell Academy too far back, but I think Davidson Day is just going to have 2 really good rim protectors in Xavier Hall, Will Stevens, and they already have a really good backcourt with Justin Whitfield, Lincoln Vincent, and Nick Arnold. And I didn't have Justin Whitfield as a transfer initially, but he's been very good at Victory Christian Center these past couple years. So, yeah, you got those guys. Greenfield School is still really good. Kobe Edwards is the first teamer returning for us. I mentioned Davidson Day. Harold's Christian is a team that is so athletic and fun to watch. You have Antonio McCoy and Deshaun McCoy just leaping, jumping, getting alley-oops. And then a few others. There's so many others to mention, but Wesleyan Christian, Trinity Christian, Gaston Christian, and then some teams that didn't make our top 25, but we definitely noticed them. Forsyth Country Day with Q Williams at running point. Fayetteville Academy looked really good when I saw them. And then Wayne Country Day and Providence Day as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one of the things to point out about the way too early rankings is that, A, they're published on a Wednesday in July. But B,
snapshot. It's just a snapshot, yeah.
It's just a snapshot, and there's 500, 600 teams in the state of North Carolina that play basketball that are eligible for the high school OT ranking. So if you are 25 or even 26 through 35, like you are really, really, really good, and you have state title aspirations. Let's get into the NCHSA side. As you mentioned, a lot of turnover there at the live period. There were not the household names that people are accustomed to, whether it be transfer, guys transferring out, or in the case, CJ Rosser, who had played with Team USA, Jordan Page, who had played with Team USA, weren't there. They haven't announced that they're going anywhere as we shoot this, but those type of guys weren't there with their teams They had just made a run winning with Team USA. So I think one of the unique parts of the NCBCA boys live period was the fact that it allowed a lot of other names to take center stage.
Yeah, this is going to be a year of fresh faces in the association on the public schools. And it was kind of cool to go to that event because you felt like you were kind of discovering new players who could really have breakout seasons. Now, some guys may be like, wait, didn't he already break out? He was first team all conference last year. But there's a little bit different notion in having like statewide notoriety and having its regional notoriety. So this year, there's a chance, there's a possibility. Again, if I was just mentioning the guys who were not with their teams at this live period, it could mean nothing. It could mean that they're going somewhere. Who knows? But in the past, sometimes it does mean that someone is transferring or someone's leaving. But Kendra Harrison wasn't with Reidsville. He could easily graduate early after football season and not play basketball this year. CJ Rosser. They had that plus the NBA Top 100 camp, so it could have just been rest. But he wasn't with Northern Nash, and Jordan Page not with Broughton. If those three do not return, then you're looking at everyone. The only two players, I think, from first or second team high school OT All-State last year that are returning are Deontay Neal of Reidsville, the Gatorade Player of the Year, and Jai Dawkins of Ben L. Smith. And that is it. And that's out of 30 players. I think those are the only two. I may be missing one other guy, but it's not much. I think North as much as we have these new faces showing up, it's a lot of the same teams, however. North Mecklenburg is still really deep. But it's not Chadlin Trailer's show anymore. It's Xavier Young on the low block. Okay, it's Ashton Pierce, who's kind of been the second option for the Vikings for the last couple of years. Ben L. Smith is the returning state champ, but they should be really good again. New Hanover, again, they've been runner-up 2 years in a row. They should still be really good. But instead of being led by Rod Meek Allen, it's Kellen Brown's turn. Okay, it's Jazeer Wright McGee's turn to run the show. Chambers, people, if you wrote out off Chambers because they lost two second-team All-State guys, Marcus Kerr and Taurus Bowie, I got news for you. Like, they're still really good. Except now it's Malik McCotter, it's Cameron Thompson, it's Quintel Young. Like, get used to these names. Panther Creek, who was young last year, had some injuries. Like, get ready to learn names like Zyvon Puckett, Corey Smith, Camden Hill. Like, West Forsyth was waiting in the wings last year. Kamari Manuel and Jordan Tate are some names you got to know there.
So that would have been really easy to kind of write them off. You just see, oh, Jakari Brim not there anymore. Okay, cool. But you're looking at them and you're like, that's an 8A West contender right there.
It is. And they're a good example of someone that in the past, they would have always run up against somebody else. And now you're like, well, hey, 8A West could be them in Chambers, like easily, because there's so few teams. Southern Durham is still going to be really good. Aiden Jeffries coming in out of St. Louis is kind of like,
my goodness, what a replacement for Jackson Keith.
The most random thing, right? Coming from St. Louis, he's got 1 year left, and he's going to play at Southern Durham, and he's basically like a perfect replacement for Jackson Keith. AJ Mormon's still a great point guard there. Was one of the few freshmen that made our All-State team last year. Hoggard is a team that looks around and says, hey, 8A East is winnable, right? Hoggard and Panther Creek. Do not forget, I know the few of these teams now, I know we're like, hey, are you disrespecting us? And the answer is no, absolutely not. Independence in 7A is in our way too early top 25. West Charlotte in 8A is in our way too early top 25. They had a few different transfers. They're going to be really good. Independence brings back a lot of people. Queens Grant is in 2A, and they looked really good. Okay, Chase Smith said he models his game after Tim Duncan, and that is enough for me. When a young kid says, I want to model my game after the big fundamental, like tells me he's on the right track. Northwood is still going to hang around Cam Fowler, Chad Graves, because they're now in 3A. Again, you look around 3A, who's left? A few other teams kind of remind you where they land. Farmville Central is now 3A. Reidsville is now 4A. Do not be surprised if Southeast Raleigh and Heritage and Mooresville make some noise in 7A. Do not be surprised if South Mecklenburg, Myers Park, and Huff, who are now all in the same conference, those three, make some noise in 8A. Again, as things change, as you basically cut every class in half, the contenders cut in half. And so now some teams look around and say, hey, we can make a run. And there's just going to be so many fresh names. Like we did a whole story where we just interviewed 14 different players. And a lot of those guys are not people that made our all-state team last year. In some cases, we're not really on that, cutting line, but this is their year. This is the year they make that leap. And so it's going to be, I think, exciting. It may not be what we had 2 years ago, where you had Wake Forest, Duke, Carolina, and State, all with.
I don't think we're ever going to see that again.
Each one of those, the Big Four, had an in-state public school recruit who every time they played somewhere had a packed house. And all 4 of them, except one, actually all 4 did make it to at least one regional final in their careers, but all of them made it. 3 of them made it to the regional final in their last year, which was the first year that Final Four set up in Winston-Salem. So it may not be one of those years, right? But it's going to be a fun year, and it's going to be eventful, and you're going to have to start programming your mind a little bit to get used to some new faces and some new teams.
I think the parity is going to be a really good thing as well, especially now that we are moving to 8 classifications. Like, it just leaves things so wide open. And again, there are just so many programs that are going to go into the first week in November saying, you know what, if the ball bounces the right way, this is very much our year. And I think that's really fun. And I think it's going to be really fun to cover, because there are going to be a lot of different guys who, break onto the scene that we may not have seen this past month. I mean, there's going to be so many guys that are just new and get that opportunity to, do their thing and step into the limelight that, maybe some of these guys over the last couple of years, like an Isaiah Evans or a Drake Powell had really stolen the show. I mean, you saw last year, Northwood makes a run after Drake Powell graduates to the 2A state championship game. And who was it? It was Cam Fowler, a guy who was, second, third piece on that team 2-3 years ago. And he just went at it every day in practice with Powell. And then when, Drake moves on to UNC, it all of a sudden becomes Cam Fowler's show. And he is good enough to take that team back to the state championship. I think that's a great example of it. And also, you had mentioned Deontay Neal. If Kendre does have that option where he goes on and forgoes his senior basketball season, it's going to be really fun to watch Deontay Neal play on a team where there aren't 3 other guys scoring 15 points a game. Like, it could be really fun to watch him score 30, 35 a night because of his skill set and the way he plays. So that could be really exciting as well. But yeah, I think it's going to be a good thing for the NCHSA basketball, scene.
Go ahead and circle these 2 conferences as the ones that'll be the most fun. They're right next to each other, both in Mecklenburg County. Greater Charlotte, that's where Huff, Myers Park, and South Meck have landed. Okay. And then the Meck Power 6, that has got Chambers, West Charlotte, Independence, and North Mecklenburg all in the same league. So there's these conferences, it's going to take a while for me to get used to them. I still have a few critiques of how some of them are made, but in the case of, for instance, those 2 conferences right there, I kind of like what it does in that it makes these conference games so eventful, because like those are programs that all kind of want to compare themselves with one another, and now they get to do that. And there's going to be some really fun basketball going on in some really packed gyms in January, February, which we can't, as much as we look at the state championship race, let's not think about the mistake of like all the new conference rivalries that'll get birthed because of this new realignment as well.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very exciting to see some of these games. And yeah, while it may not be like a household name of a program that has been to multiple state championships over the last couple of years, that doesn't mean that on a Tuesday night or a Friday night, they can't go across town and have a really exciting game. J. Mike, lots of exciting basketball. Obviously, we will have tons of coverage previewing that all the way up to November on HighSchoolOT.com, and then dive deep into the basketball world once the ball goes in the air in mid-November. Lots of things you can see. Again, High School OT Insiders, the way too early list, over a dozen interviews, it feels like, from every live period from J. Mike. You can go see that on HighSchoolOT.com and dive into a little bit more analysis. Also, Joel Bryant for High School OT Insiders, if you want to see basketball coaching changes from across the state. There's several dozen that have happened on the boys and girls side. You can check that out. And then impact transfers that are coming in on the boys and girls side. High School OT Insiders have an opportunity to see what that movement looks like. Some people who have left schools and others who have come in. Again, that's all on High School OT Insider. We're going to take one last break, and we're going to come back, close out with a couple of final notes here. Again, you are in the High School OT Press Box. Evan Moesta here alongside J. Mike Blake. All right, we are back. Final news and notes here as we wrap up the High School OT Press Box here on July 15th. Lots of things upcoming around the state. Again, as we had mentioned, J. Mike, he has all-state teams on the way for baseball and softball. Those will be things to keep a lookout for. If you have not seen already, all of the other spring sports already have all-state teams out. And again, that is crowning up to around the best 100 players in every sport for the spring. Girls lacrosse, boys lacrosse, girls soccer, that just dropped. You can see those from last week on highschoolot.com, but baseball and softball on the way. The East-West All-Star Games, we're about a week away from heading out to Greensboro. The girls and boys basketball East-West All-Star Games in Greensboro at the Fieldhouse, and then over at Grimsley High School on July 23rd. It'll be boys soccer and girls soccer. Again, that's July 22nd and 23rd in Greensboro, the East-West All-Star Games from the North Carolina Coaches Association. And then over the next couple of days, the High School OT Jamboree and the Southeast Raleigh Bulldog Bash powered by High School OT. The fields for those two events will be announced. Again, the High School OT Jamboree, the annual event presented by the United States Army, is August 9th at Trentini Stadium on the campus of Wake Forest High School in Wake Forest, North Carolina. And then just under a week later, August 15th, is the Southeast Raleigh Bulldog Bash, powered by High School OT. Lots of really talented teams from across the state of North Carolina are in those events, and some really intriguing matchups where you can see a lot of top recruits and a lot of top teams across the state. So lots of things happening on highschoolot.com. It'll be very interesting to follow along as we go through the month of July. We are quickly, and I mean quickly, approaching fall sports season. It is just a couple of weeks away on July 30th, 31st, August 1st. Right around then is when a lot of stuff is going to start coming out, preview coverage, rankings, all of that on High School OT for volleyball, boys soccer, football, tennis, golf, cross country, all of it, your statewide source for high school sports news. For Evan Moesta, Joel Bryant, J. Mike Blake, we thank you for tuning in to the High School OT Press Box.